Day one is in the book for Sun Devils spring practice. Let's overreact.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. A special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcasts, and stay in touch with the show by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back in. We are officially one day into Arizona State Sun Devils football spring practices. Kicked off at Kajikawa Field. Beautiful weather. Nice and overcast. There was a little bit of sun that was just enough to keep you warm. I wore my Locked On Sun Devils long sleeve and wore a pair of shorts, and it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect weather. And you can't ask for much more when you are getting into a new rhythm and you are going into year two of the Kenny Dillingham era. And the guys who are returning are stepping up and being leaders. And the guys who are coming into the transfer portal are stepping up and being leaders. And some of the freshmen that were available, they looked pretty solid. And overall, I feel like there was quite a bit to take away even from day one of practice. And the whole point of this is to overreact because we're one day in. We can't come to these definitive conclusions that even though it would be fun, it's not realistic. So we will keep it kind of mellow, but of course there are going to be some overreactions here. And that's going to be more towards the end of the podcast when I talk about same old from some of the studs for the program. But we're going to talk about the rhythm for the Sun Devils practice. And we're going to talk about the way things unfolded and the way that the practice was run and all that good stuff. Now, if you paid attention last year, either to my podcast when I was breaking it down, or if you follow Chris Cartman for Sun Devil Sorts or Hode Rubino for Devil's Digest, the one thing that you know is that it's high intensity, it's very quick, and Kenny Dillingham demands that you are putting full effort, whether that's going from drill to drill, whether that is giving 100% effort, no matter what you're doing, whether it's one-on-ones or 7-on-7s or whatever. Kenny Dillingham demands excellence, and he demands that you are going to be putting 100% into whatever it is. I mean, one of the things that Kenny really preached at this time last year during spring ball, he came out first practice. You know what he said? He said, that was a horrible practice. We did terrible. And the biggest thing he highlighted was the effort. He said, we're walking in between drills, we're lackadaisical, and we're not showing the urgency. That's huge. And for a brand new head coach to come out and say for first practice, I mean, pretty much verbatim, he was like, it was horrible. It was terrible. You kind of got taken back by it and you're like, oh, geez. Okay. Kenny is a perfectionist. So he comes out of practice today and he seemed pretty happy. He told the media, obviously, first question, hey, how was practice? He goes, it was a solid practice. And he said that to the guys as well. I could overhear him when he was breaking the team. And he said, solid practice, blah, blah, blah. Couldn't hear the rest of it. But he was a lot happier about today's performance than he was a year ago. And wow, what a concept, Richie. Like, who would have thought that a year's time would lead to better results? And what I'll tell you is that's not always the case. You have some guys that just don't incorporate the culture and the tone and the mindset that you want to set when you are year one, year two, year three at a new program. And Kenny Dillingham has absolutely set the tone. He has absolutely let you know what the expectations are, what's not okay, what is okay. And I mean, They dismissed Juju Mitchell last year before the season started because there wasn't a good chemistry between him and the system. Isaiah Johnson dismissed from the program. I mean, Kenny Dillingham was not afraid to tell guys, hey, we have a standard here. If you're not going to meet it, you might be better off going somewhere else. And you could see today that these guys are understanding that. Like I said, there was hustle. These guys were not walking. They weren't jogging. It wasn't a sprint, but it was with motivation that these guys were moving in between drills. You could tell that they were motivated and wanted to be there, that they understood that culture, that expectation. And that's something that Kenny has really, really preached, is understanding the expectation and understanding the standard that he has set. So I keep using those words over and over again, but that's from the man himself. There is a standard, there is a culture. You're going to match it or you're not. And the guys on day one looked like they got it. And it was another high intensity day. So, I mean, it was fast paced and they were running some serious drills. There was a lot of good workouts. They stretched for probably 20, maybe 25 minutes today. And they were just gearing them up for what was going to be a really long 2-hour practice for them. They went till probably about 11:15. So they went 15, maybe 20 minutes over what the allotted time was scheduled for. I mean, they practice hard too. One of the things that really stood out to me, so on Tuesdays, we get to speak to the offensive coaches, and on Thursdays, we speak to the defensive coaches. And accordingly, I will kind of plan my podcasts around that. So we got to speak with Marcus Arroyo. At the end of practice, he came over, he spoke with reporters and all that good stuff, and he was asked about practice, and he said it was chaotic in a good way. And you were kind of taken back by that. You're like, what does that mean? And keep in mind, this is the same guy who said he rewrote his playbook in order to match the previous playbook's language so the guys understood it better. So Arroyo definitely has his own kind of what's the word? I don't want to keep using standard, but I mean, he understands the way he wants things run. He's trying to make it so his guys are able to understand it easier, so they get it earlier. They understand it, the language, the concepts, whatever. They get it now instead of, 2 months into the season. Now he talks about how practice was chaotic in a good way. And the way that he explained it was, when you are in game time, when you are on the field playing the 60 minutes against an actual team, not preseason, not training camp, not spring ball, whatever. When you are on the field and you are playing competition, what you want to see is these guys being able to thrive in an environment that is constantly shifting and changing and is unpredictable. So with practice today, even though it's structured, I mean, of course, they have the timer, so they let you know, hey, there's 10 minutes on this drill, there's 5 minutes on this drill, 15, 7, whatever. You do have the structure, but what you have going on is a lot of movement. Again, it's that high intensity. It's that high level pace that Kenny wants. Is he wants his guys running and jogging and whatever to get to the next drills, playing hard on every down. No one's taking plays off. Like, this is the chaotic energy that Marcus Arroyo was looking for. Is he wants these guys to understand, hey, we're not going school zone 50 miles an hour. We are freeway speeds. We are going 65. We are going 80. We're going 100. Whatever it takes, you need to understand that this is a sport that demands you be ready like that. There's no time for you to be lackadaisical and take your time, whatever. You need to be able to work and operate in a chaotic environment. And that's what Marcus Arroyo was preaching to us. And that's what he gave the explanation for. And again, it's a really interesting answer because you're not really used to people telling you like it was really chaotic, but in a good way. Like, you hear the word chaotic and you're like, oh, geez, that's not good. Well, that's not the case. It was chaotic and he loved it. Trenton Bourguet was the last person we got to speak with for the media. Bourguet was asked about everything. He said, it was really good. They asked him about all the changes, and he said, I've played in several offenses since I've been here. I've seen several people come and go. But the one thing that I recognize here is that Marcus Arroyo definitely has a structure, and he knows what he wants, and he appreciates that. And he also mentioned, we're working with Kenny Dillingham again, so there is a little bit of consistency there. Some of the guys are back. Elijah Badger is back. Cameron Scadaboo is back. Bryce Pierre is back. All sorts of guys along the offensive line and the depth of the skill positions are back. So there is some consistency that was brought in from last year to this year. Bourguet mentioned that. He was like, last year we had a lot of new faces. This year we have a lot of familiar faces. It's a good thing to see. We can see it. He can see it. Everyone can understand, last year was basically a new team from the unit we saw in 2022. 2024, they improved, but you got a lot of your most important players coming back. And that's massive, man. That is so good for everything. And then one thing I want to leave you with, one little nugget, is Bourguet was kind of asked about his future. They were like, why did you decide to stay? Why didn't you want to leave? Bourguet said, and I friggin' love this, and I'm going to share it with you guys too, is Bourguet said, I have wanted to stay with the team who brought me on. And he worded it like this. He said, you can choose to go any place you want, or you can choose your situation and stay where it all began. And he wanted to stay where it all began. Love that. Absolutely love that answer. And then he proceeded to say, when it's all said and done, I would love to come back. I would love to be a member of Kenny Dillingham's coaching staff, whatever role that might be in. But this is another guy. This is another guy, guys, that he is all bought in. And he's about everything that Kenny Dillingham is. When you have players that are so bought in that they say, even after my 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years are done at Arizona State, I still want to be a part of the program. That's huge. And it's so exciting to have a guy like Trenton Bourguet, who is a massive fan favorite, who is somebody that is a great leader and a great example. He's a great student. He's a great athlete. He's a great person. You have those people that want to stay, that want to continue building what you have going on. And that's huge. And that goes leaps and miles. And it helps activate the Valley. Like, you have DJ Foster that's on staff. That was a huge move in itself. You potentially, and I would be surprised if they didn't keep him in like a graduate assistant role or whatever, but you have a guy who is interested, who wants to keep going where it started. That's rare. And in today's world of the transfer portal and the NIL dominating all the headlines, when you find a guy like Trenton Bourguet that's bought in, that wants to stay, you gotta treasure those guys. You gotta keep them around as long as you possibly can. Very impressive. We've never had bad things to say about Trenton Bourguet, but now we have even more good things to say about him. We're going to transition in just a moment, because speaking of Bourguet, we got to talk about the quarterback situation. We're going to hop into that in just 1 second. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Also want to talk to you guys about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your #1 ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because at eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and find yourself having to turn down the volume because of all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 streaming channel program for you every day that brings you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or for free on Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get back into our conversation now. We're going to talk about the quarterback situation because let's face it, that was always going to dominate the headlines. And nonetheless, that's what we got to see in the first day of practice. Taking a look at the three guys that we got to see throw. We saw Trenton Bourguet, we saw transfer Sam Levitt, and we saw walk-on Navi Bruzon. Jaden Rashada was there. He was dressed. He was working, but he was not throwing the ball. And that's where I want to start this conversation is Marcus Arroyo had this to say about Jaden Rashada. He was asked, is it like kind of a setback that you don't have them out there? Like, what are you kind of working on with him? And he told him, we have guys that can compete. But with Rashada, he's not going to be sitting on the sidelines and doing whatever, whether that's, studying a playbook or sitting on his phone, whatever it might be, that's not what he's going to do. What he's going to do is continue working on mechanics, working on his progressions and his mindset and the way that he processes things. He is still going to be, quote unquote, working out. It's not the physical kind of working out. You're going to see him on the field. He's got his helmet on. He's out there dressed. He is just working on other stuff instead of throwing the football, which we all knew was not going to happen. But he's out there. He's on the field. He's talking to Arroyo. He's talking to the other quarterbacks. He's talking to the receivers. Still working. Great to see. Great to hear. All that good stuff. Moving on. Like I said, you had Bourguet, you had Levitt, you had Bruzon that were slinging the rock today. Trenton Bourguet looked pretty good. And, that's kind of what we've come to expect from him is he is a quality quarterback, somebody who, sure, he's not the fastest, he's not the tallest, he's not the heaviest, he's not the biggest arm in the room, but he understands how to process. He understands where to put the ball. He's still quality at worst. I mean, yeah, he had a bad year last year, but everybody did. I feel like he's a lot closer to 2022 than he is 2023. In 2022, Arizona State turned a corner with him under center. I mean, they beat Washington with Trenton Bourguet under center. When he came in off the bench, he is more than capable of being a quality starter for you. And he showed it again. He looked pretty solid last year. There was a lot of growing pains, but everybody was experiencing them. This year, with a whole year under his belt of learning the system, or at least understanding the expectations, obviously it's a new offense, but again, that was part of Arroyo's plan, was to rewrite it in a sense so that Bourguet could understand it good. Felt like it felt like it was a solid transition for him. Keep in mind, again, I'll preface it, these are definitely closer to overreactions because we're only one day in, but he looked solid. Sam Levitt, same thing. There were some good and there was some bad from him. And the same for Bourguet is they were not afraid to throw outside the hashes. They pushed the ball down the field a little bit. I felt that Levitt was a lot more aggressive in pushing the ball down the field than Bourguet was, which is nice to see. Of course, there's lots of interceptions, but I will never put stock into interceptions in training camp, in practice, in spring ball, whatever it is. Because that's where I want you to throw interceptions. I want you to test boundaries. I want you to see what you can do, what you can't do. I want to see you build chemistry with guys and understand, like, hey, I can put this ball up and X receiver is going to come down with it. That's what I want to see. So I have no problem with interceptions. Short of you having 30 pass attempts and throwing 30 interceptions, I don't care. you can throw a handful of them. That's fine. It's when you get incredibly egregious with it. Again, like the scenario I said, you can put a little stock in that. But I mean, you throw 7, 8 interceptions in camp. I don't care. I really don't. Navi Bruzan looked pretty good as advertised, because remember, Kenny Dillingham kind of hyped him up. He was like, yeah, this is a kid that you need to keep an eye on. He's somebody that we're really excited about. I think he looks pretty darn good for a walk-on quarterback who was very overlooked because of the size and all that stuff. For what it's worth, he's also a lefty, which I did not know. So maybe that played into it too. Whatever it is, I mean, he looked good. He slung the ball around the field. He pushed it. He checked down. He looks more than capable of playing at the level that Arizona State demands out of their quarterbacks. We'll see if he continues to build upon it, if he regresses, if he stays where he's at. But as of day one, I was pretty happy with what I saw out of Navi Bruzan. He's definitely someone that I'm going to be paying extra close attention to. I'll keep you guys posted on everything with him. Quarterbacks, I thought looked solid. Was it a perfect day? No. Were we expecting a perfect day? Absolutely not. There's going to be growing pains, all that good stuff with a new system. Now we're going to go ahead and wrap up this podcast talking about how we have the same old from our stars here. Give me one moment. We'll talk about it in a second. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking a team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. And just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The NC State Wolfpacks were obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. The team absolutely surprised us all with a powerful performance in their first 2 games in the tournament. Wins over Texas Tech and Oakland have set them up to play Marquette in the Sweet 16. They say win life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Golden Grizzlies have done here. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. One more time, wherever you're getting your podcast, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. We're going to wrap it up with the same old from the stars of the team. 4 guys stood out to me. 2 of them, we saw extensive roles for them last year. 2 of them we did not see at all. Spoiler alert, in case you can't guess who they are. We got to start with Cameron Scadaboo, the people's running back, as I have dubbed him, because he's Mr. Do-It-All. He runs it, he catches it, he throws it, he punts it. It's the people's running back. He looked good. He is still slippery. He can still cut on a dime. This is a bell cow looking guy. I spoke with Sean Aguano over the weekend, or on Thursday, excuse me. He said, we still have big expectations. He's somebody that we view as a 3-down player. He's somebody that we believe can be a bell cow. Marcus Arroyo said today, yeah, that's a 3-down guy, even in pass blocking situations. Scadaboo's someone we want out there. Not a surprise to any of us. We saw how good Scadaboo was last year. We are aware of the talent. After day 1, looks like it didn't go away. Looks like it's still there. Clayton Smith. Now, you know I'm a big Clayton Smith guy. He got big. He got big. I want to say he played around 225, 230 last year. He's big, long, and lean. He put on some muscle. The sheet that gives us the roster lists him at 245, and he looks every bit of 245. And he still moves. He's still quick. He's still violent. But my goodness, he's just really growing into that body and that physique. And he continues to just get stronger. And it's going to pay off on the field. Because last year, you did see glimpses of a guy who's just so blindingly fast off the edge and is able to get after the quarterback as a speed rusher. Now what you want to see is being able to convert speed to power and use his functional strength to be able to shed blocks and play a little better off the perimeter for the run game, whatever it is. There's just aspects of his game that could have been improved by getting bigger, and he's bigger. So day one, overreaction. Yeah, he looks great. In a very physical sense, he looks great. He looks like he's grown into an edge rusher's body. You have a guy who's 6'3", 6'4", 245 pounds. You want them to be able to be as violent, be as physical as he is, but you couple it with the speed that he has. I think a breakout year isn't coming for him. I've been on the breakout. I said he was going to break out last year. 4.5 sacks. Pretty dang solid for, especially considering it pretty much came in the last 2 months of the season. He turned it on. I would not be surprised if at worst he matches that total, and I think it's going to be much better than that. I think you're going to see him flirting with 8 sacks, 9 sacks, maybe 10 sacks. It's just a matter of who steps up next to him, if that's Prince Dorbah, if it's Garen Stansbury, if it's Roman Petrie, or anybody else that they brought in or is returning. They just need somebody to be able to step up across from him. But as far as Clayton Smith is concerned, yeah, we got a guy. It's perfect. The 2 guys who didn't play last year also stood out. No surprise. Jake Smith, Xavier Alford. Both of them were ruled ineligible as 2-time transfers. Whatever is what it is, but they're back. They still look good. Jake Smith, still a really good route runner, soft hands. He was getting some wide receiver 1 snaps across from Troy O'Mary. O'Mary looked really good too. Those 2 could do some serious damage together. And the thought that you have those guys along with Elijah Badger and then Jordan Tyson and Melcon Stovall, yeah, you got a ridiculously good receiver room. But Jake Smith still stood out. He stood out last year in camp. He stood out once again today. Hopefully he can continue stringing together good practices to continue building upon what we're hoping will be a breakout year. Finally, Xavier Alford. Oh, it was so good to see him on the field. It was so good to see him on the field. That is a center field safety. That is somebody who is able to just cover the back end and not have to worry about who's going into his zone. He's going to find a blanket or find a way to blanket. He's somebody who's got some ball skills to pull down turnovers, all that good stuff. Jake Smith and Xavier Alford, you wouldn't have thought that they took a year off from football. They looked just as comfortable in late March as they did in training camp last year before they didn't get to play. For them to continue to pick up where they left off with missing that time. Guys, I cannot emphasize how huge that is that you stay doing what you're doing. Really, really excited for these guys to continue stringing together good practices. I did mention Troy O'Mary as someone who stood out. Montana Warren also stood out. Montana obviously missed the majority of last season because of a leg injury he sustained at Camp Tonto Zona. So those guys coming back, you love to see that they're looking good. O'Mary was getting a lot of wide receiver 1 snaps with Jake Smith because Badger is out. Great news all around. There was a lot of strong practices today. There's a lot of work to be done, but that's okay because it's day 1 of spring ball. There's what I got for you. Offensively focused and some overreactions. What do you guys want to know? What have you guys been noticing or hearing during spring ball? Let me know in the comments. Hit me up on Twitter at Richie Brads36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Wherever you're getting your podcasts, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and follow me on Twitter at Richie Brads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Thanks as always for making this your first listen of the day. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Like I said yesterday, as of now, the tentative plan is Tuesdays and Thursdays will be focused on what is going on at spring ball. I am thinking about doing a Sunday episode to recap Saturday. The problem is I won't be at Saturday practices, so it would be more of a word of mouth thing. If you guys want me to do it, let me know, and I can do some extra research and be able to provide you guys with updates. Let me know if that's something you guys are interested in. Until then, though, I'll keep you posted on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'll see you next time. You keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.